When someone raises their voice at you, the first reaction most of us have is to meet that same energy. It's almost instinctive to push back with equal force because the louder someone gets, the more our brain interprets it as a threat, and the natural response is to defend ourselves. But here's the thing, when you respond to yelling with yelling, the situation never improves, it only escalates. Two people shouting at each other isn't communication, it's just noise, and nothing productive ever comes out of it. If you want to take control of the moment, you don't do it by overpowering the other person's voice. You do it by controlling yours. Staying calm doesn't mean you're weak, it means you're disciplined. It means you refuse to let someone else dictate how you show up in that moment, and that's real strength. When you keep your voice steady, you shift the balance of power. The person yelling expects you to fight back or crumble. When you don't give them either, it creates a pause. That pause is powerful. It can be uncomfortable for them, but it works in your favor. It communicates that you are not easily shaken, that their yelling isn't going to pull you into a spiral. By keeping your tone calm, you're sending a message. I can handle this situation without losing control. This doesn't mean you have to sit there silently and take it. You can speak, but the way you speak matters just as much as what you say. Lower your tone, slow down your pace, and keep your words simple. A calm tone cuts through the chaos like a sharp edge. It forces the other person to either match your calm or realize how ineffective their yelling is. This is how you protect the conversation from spinning out of control. It's how you steer things back toward reason. It's also worth remembering that staying calm isn't just about managing the other person. It's about managing yourself. Yelling back might give you a quick release, but it also leaves you drained, regretful, and often misunderstood. When you stay calm, you're protecting your own peace, your own energy. You're making sure you don't walk away from the moment feeling like you lost yourself in anger. That's the long-term win. Think about the last time someone yelled at you. If you matched their tone, how did that feel afterward? Chances are it didn't solve the problem, but imagine if you had stayed composed, kept your volume steady, and didn't let their storm pull you under. That version of you is harder to shake, harder to provoke, harder to control. And the truth is, people who yell are usually trying to gain control. When you stay calm, you don't give them that. You quietly take it back for yourself. When someone is yelling at you, it's easy to get caught up in the volume and lose sight of the real message behind it. Yelling is rarely about the words themselves. It's about the emotion underneath those words. Most of the time, the person isn't yelling because they enjoy it. They're yelling because they feel frustrated, unheard, or overwhelmed. That's why the smartest move is to acknowledge their emotion without rewarding their delivery. Instead of focusing on how loud they are, focus on what they're trying to express beneath the noise. If you can show them that you hear their frustration, you immediately take some of the fire out of the moment. Saying something like, "I can tell you're upset," or "I hear you're frustrated," changes the energy. You're not agreeing with their yelling, and you're not giving them permission to keep raising their voice. What you're doing is addressing the core feeling that's driving their outburst. People often yell because they don't feel understood, so when you name their emotion, you're holding up a mirror and saying, "I get it." That recognition alone can lower the intensity because it meets a human need we all have, the need to feel seen and acknowledged. There's a difference between validating emotions and validating behavior. You can acknowledge that someone is angry without saying their yelling is okay. It's about separating the two. You can show empathy for their state of mind while still maintaining your own boundary about how you want to be spoken to. That balance is key. If you only shut down the yelling, they may feel dismissed. If you only validate their words, you risk encouraging the behavior. But if you acknowledge the feeling, you open the door for calmer communication without giving in to the yelling. Tone plays a big role here. When you say, "I hear you're frustrated," don't say it in a sarcastic or dismissive way. Say it in a calm, even tone that shows sincerity. This isn't about shutting them up. It's about diffusing the situation. You're showing that you're listening, that you're willing to understand, but also that you're not going to be dragged into a shouting match. When people realize they're being heard, their need to shout often decreases. Think about how often arguments spiral simply because no one feels understood. Two people yelling back and forth usually aren't fighting about the facts, they're fighting to be acknowledged. By stepping in and addressing the emotion directly, you stop the spiral from gaining speed. It's like taking the air out of a balloon before it bursts. You're not ignoring the problem, you're handling it in a way that keeps it from getting bigger. This approach also protects you. Instead of wasting your energy shouting back, you're conserving it and using it strategically. You're focusing on what matters, the real issue beneath the yelling, instead of the surface level noise. And when the other person sees that you're steady enough to recognize their frustration without being shaken by their volume, it often encourages them to bring the conversation down to your level. When someone raises their voice, it can feel like you're under attack, and the natural response is to either shut down or fight back. But neither of those reactions gives you control of the situation. What actually shifts the dynamic is when you set boundaries with respect. A boundary isn't about shutting the other person out, and it's not about punishing them for yelling. It's about drawing a clear line for how you will allow yourself to be spoken to while still leaving the door open for real communication. It takes strength to say, I want to listen, but I can't do that while being yelled at. Because in that one statement, you're doing two important things. You're showing that you're willing to engage, and you're also making it clear that the yelling isn't acceptable. Most people think of boundaries as walls, but the truth is, they're more like guardrails. They keep the conversation from running off the road. Without them, yelling can spiral into insults, blame, and complete breakdown. When you calmly set a boundary, you stop that spiral before it gains momentum. You're saying, I care enough about this conversation to protect it from going off track. And that communicates not only self-respect, but also respect for the other person, because you're giving them a chance to be heard without the chaos of raised voices drowning everything out. Boundaries are most effective when delivered in a calm, steady tone. If you set a boundary while yelling, it doesn't land the same way. It just sounds like another argument. But when your voice is even, your words are clear, and your body language is grounded, the message comes across differently. You're not escalating. You're not running away. You're standing firm in a way that invites cooperation instead of more conflict. That's why boundaries aren't about control. They're about clarity. You're clarifying what you're willing to participate in and what you're not, without disrespecting the other person. It's also important to remember that boundaries aren't about changing the other person. You can't control whether they yell or not. What you can control is how you respond to it. Saying, I want to listen, but I can't do that while being yelled at, doesn't guarantee they'll stop. But it does guarantee that you've made your standard clear. If they choose to keep yelling, that's on them. If they choose to lower their voice, then your boundary has guided the conversation back into healthy territory. Either way, you've protected your peace and your integrity. Boundaries also model behavior. When you handle yelling with calm clarity, you're showing the other person what respectful communication looks like. You're not demanding they be perfect, but you're showing that you won't settle for less than a reasonable exchange. Sometimes people need that reminder. They may not even realize how their yelling is affecting the conversation until you hold up that mirror. And when you do it without anger or sarcasm, it lands much deeper. The real strength in boundaries comes from consistency. If you set one but then give in the moment the yelling continues, the boundary loses its weight. But if you calmly repeat yourself, or if necessary, step back until the conversation can happen respectfully, you reinforce the message. Boundaries that are consistent build trust because they show you mean what you say. They also build self-respect because you're proving to yourself that you won't tolerate communication that tears you down instead of building you up. Setting boundaries in the face of yelling is one of the hardest things to do because it requires you to stay composed when everything in you wants to either lash out or retreat. But that's exactly why it's so effective. It takes away the power that yelling has over you. Instead of reacting on impulse, you're responding with intention. You're not just surviving the moment, you're shaping it. And that shift, that calm but firm declaration of your limits, can turn a shouting match into a real conversation faster than anything else. When someone is yelling, it's easy for the conversation to feel like it's spiraling out of control. The noise, the tension, the emotion, it can overwhelm both people involved. That's why one of the most effective things you can do is redirect that energy into something more productive. Redirecting doesn't mean shutting someone down or dismissing their feelings. It means guiding the interaction away from chaos and toward dialogue. The moment you invite calm conversation, you're shifting the focus from the volume of their voice to the value of their words. It's a way of saying, we can get somewhere with this, but not like this. The key is to make the invitation clear without sounding condescending. Phrases like, let's take a step back and talk about this, or I want to hear what you're saying, but I need us to talk it through calmly, create a bridge. Instead of meeting fire with fire, you're offering water. You're showing the other person that you're willing to listen and work through the issue, but you're also giving them a clear path to do it in a way that doesn't damage either of you. It turns a shouting match into an opportunity for resolution. When you redirect energy, you're also taking the role of a leader in the conversation. Yelling often comes from a place of wanting control, and when you calmly invite dialogue, you're reclaiming that control in a healthier way. You're not forcing them to calm down. You're giving them the choice, and choices matter. People are more likely to lower their voices and engage when they feel they have been given an option, not when they feel cornered. By offering a path forward, you allow them to save face while still changing their approach. That's what makes redirection so powerful. It doesn't shame, it guides. This approach works especially well when combined with empathy. If you pair the redirection with an acknowledgement of their frustration, the chances of them softening increase. For example, saying, I can see you're upset, let's talk this through without raising our voices, does two things. It validates the emotion, which lowers defensiveness, and it steers the energy toward conversation, which creates a solution. This combination is what moves the interaction from confrontation to collaboration. Redirecting also requires patience. You may not get immediate results. Sometimes the other person needs a moment to burn through their emotion before they can take the invitation. That's okay. What matters is that you keep your tone calm and your words steady. The consistency in your delivery sets an example. It communicates that you're serious about having a conversation, but you're not willing to get dragged into a shouting contest. Over time, that steadiness often has a calming effect. It's worth remembering that redirection isn't about pretending the yelling didn't happen. It's about not letting it dominate the interaction. You're essentially saying, this doesn't have to go this way. And that statement, through words, tone, and presence, can change the course of the moment. You're not ignoring the problem. You're showing a better way to work through it. The focus shifts from winning the argument to actually resolving the issue, and that's where progress begins. Think about conversations you've seen where yelling only escalated. Neither side really listened. Both walked away frustrated. Now picture what happens when one person calmly redirects. The energy changes, the yelling loses its power because it no longer has a target to feed on. Instead of a fight, there's a chance for dialogue. That shift might not solve everything instantly, but it keeps the door open for understanding instead of slamming it shut with more conflict. When yelling doesn't stop even after you've stayed calm, acknowledged emotions, and set boundaries, the final step is to protect your peace. Protecting your peace doesn't mean you're giving up or running away. It means you're choosing not to stay in an environment that's harmful or unproductive. Walking away with respect shows that you value yourself enough not to be dragged into a cycle of negativity. It also communicates that while you're open to communication, you won't accept it at the cost of your own well-being. This isn't weakness, it's discipline. It's the strength to say, I'm not going to let this moment control me. The reality is that you can't always control how others behave, but you can always control how long you stay in the middle of their storm. Protecting your peace is about recognizing that you don't have to absorb someone else's anger. When you step back, you're drawing a line not just for them, but for yourself. You're saying, my energy, my calm, my focus matters too. And when you leave the space respectfully, whether that's by literally walking out of the room or by mentally detaching until the heat cools down, you're choosing preservation over escalation. That choice creates room for clarity for both sides once emotions settle. Walking away doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't mean slamming doors or throwing sharp words over your shoulder. It can be as simple as calmly saying, I'm going to step away until we can talk calmly, and then following through. That statement is powerful because it shows two things. You're not refusing to engage, but you're refusing to engage under unhealthy conditions. That balance is critical. It shows self-control and a willingness to reconnect later, but only under terms that respect your boundaries. There's also a deeper lesson in protecting your peace. It's about understanding that your presence is valuable. If someone is yelling and ignoring every attempt you've made to redirect or set boundaries, then staying there sends a silent message that you're willing to tolerate it. By walking away, you break that cycle. You demonstrate through action, not argument, that respect is the minimum requirement for your attention. Over time, people learn from that. They realize that if they want a conversation with you, yelling isn't the way to get it. Protecting your peace also preserves relationships. Yelling is often fueled by temporary emotions, and if you stay in the middle of it, the words exchanged can cause long-term damage. By stepping back, you're preventing things from being said that can't be unsaid. You're giving space for tempers to cool before continuing. In many cases, this approach keeps connections intact because it separates the person from the heat of the moment. It's saying, I value this relationship enough not to let it burn out in anger. On a personal level, protecting your peace builds resilience. Every time you choose not to engage with chaos, you strengthen your ability to remain calm in future storms. It becomes a habit, a kind of mental muscle memory. You learn that you don't have to match someone else's energy, and you don't have to win every battle to come out stronger. You only have to choose yourself again and again. That choice creates confidence, clarity, and stability that yelling can never shake. Think of it like being in a room filled with smoke. You can't control the smoke, but you can control whether you stay and keep breathing it in. Protecting your peace is choosing to step outside until the air is clear. And when you do that consistently, people notice. They may not admit it, but they see that you're not someone who can be baited into losing your cool. They see that you value yourself enough to walk away when respect isn't present. And over time, that quiet strength reshapes the way people approach you because they know you'll only engage in a way that's constructive, never destructive.